Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Crown and today we are going to have some more stories that I hope that you will enjoy. But before we start, it will be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go! First story. Want me to entertain your kid after I said no? Got it. Background. I'm a mom. I have a 7-year-old boy and I just went back to school last month. Right now I need to study a lot and I deal with a lot of guilt about not having as much time with my son. So, to kill two birds with one stone, I took my son to Science World this past weekend and brought my books to study while my son was exploring independently. After we spent 2 hours on exhibits together, my son was settled in on a sensory activity where he ended up playing for about an hour. This was exactly what I was hoping for. So I took a seat with an eye shut and pulled out my laptop and textbook, and I started cramming. I was doing well and getting through content when this strange little spawn started killing my leg and decided my laptop was perfect to play with. Big hell no from me. 1. Brand new laptop that cost half my monthly rent. 2. Strange germ factory of my lab during the tail end of a pandemic. 3. Not my kid, not my damn job. Unfortunately, his mom was the kind that has no clue about social expectations and acted like her convenience trumps all. So when I asked her to remove the kid who was close enough to climb up into my uterus, she said, "Oh, it's okay." Yep, it's okay. See, I'm going to school for healthcare and the content I was studying was just a thing boys giggle about. So this 3 or 4-year-old boy got a lesson on the lower digestive tract. He learned about the Bristol stool chart and a whole lot of terminology, which I made sure he knew before our goodbyes. About 15 minutes passed and I told him to go tell mommy what he learned. Now anyone who knows kids knows that at this age they have no volume control and are completely without shame. And they love fart talk. So what did this sweet boy scream at his mom in this full-to-capacity quiet zone? "Mom, I learned about poop and such. Did you know a butt is a muscle and that you have one too?" That was epic. I'm quite certain they both learned something from that. Next story. Hit and Run Justice. Preface. So this happened back in 2007. In my comments history, a local redditor posted in r/Ottawa talking about hit and run and asked for stories of people having it all worked out. Posting my story brought back some euphoric feelings of vindication and justice being served. I felt like I should share a more elaborate version of what happened. So this happened in Ottawa at Bruce Pit, an off-leash dog park located in the West End. The wife, girlfriend at the time we got married in 2009, we lived close. Well, close enough to this park. And we brought our pupper there often. The parking lot, it's just a gravel uneven mess that has no lines or direction to park. But people follow some sense of normalcy when parking. The cast. My wife, Sparky, not really in the story but that was his name. Crown prosecutor, I'm in Canada. Police officer, hit and run offender, and a witness. And also an ex-copper. We have a few of these, not sure if it's ex-copper or not that represented the hit and run offender, but it's one of those. So not an attack on ex-copper or any of those businesses. They are legitimate and do a good job. The story. So we are parked at Bruce Pit just like any other time. Nothing abnormal about it. My wife and I went on with our long walk and playtime for Sparky. When we were leaving, we were heading back to the car and I was putting Sparky into the back seat and had seen a piece of paper on my window, but thought it was just advertising. My wife picked it up and gasped saying, "Someone hit the car." 2006 Kia Sportage at the time. And I reply with, "Huh? What?" and proceed to check. The front driver's side bumper was all scrapped off from side to front. Lights and bumper were scrapped. I read a note which said, "I saw someone hit your car. Call me if you need to." Then he left me his number. I'm like, whoa, someone witnessed what happened. That's nice. Busy place after all. At this point, I called the police non-emergency line. My wife and I were waiting for the police officer to arrive, looking at the entrance when one walked right up to us. Turns out the police officer was walking her dog with her partner on break. And that's when I noticed the officer's car in the back of the parking area. I explained what happened, and the officer took my information and my wife's. She then stepped away and went to call the witness. She came back and said she has more investigating to do and to talk with the witness more. But she'll get back to us at home. No problem. My wife and I head out. We drive to get gas and there is a local charity washing cars. So we had them wash ours. Skipping the damaged part. Got home, took pictures, called insurance, and so on. Hours later, the police officer shows up and gives us a copy of the report and tells us that the hit-and-run offender got a ticket for failure to report an accident. $200 fine. And we were like, cool. All's good. My insurance fixed the car. Parts and labor totaled to about $1,300. I did not pay anything. So, not out of pocket for anything. All's good. I'm off on the timeline of events, but I remember a few months later getting a call from the Crown Prosecutor, asking more details of everything that happened and telling me that I'll be getting a summons to appear, as the hit-and-run offender was contesting the ticket. Rightfully so, a failure to report accident looks bad. Very bad for insurance, and they could skyrocket their premiums or even outright cancel them. In any case, a week or two later I got the summons to appear in a couple of months. The day arrives and I head to court with my wife. We get into the courtroom and they have other tickets being contested that day. Speeding, parking, and so on. In the courtroom is a Crown Prosecutor, police officer, witness, ex-copper, and other randoms that are on the schedule that day. I brought my invoice with me and gave it to the prosecutor. They run through the other people quickly. Basically, it's them just saying not guilty, and since the ticket issuing officer is not present, they get off. Funny side story though, one guy pleads guilty with reason. The judge says, "Are you sure?" And it goes back and forth 2 or 3 times, to which the prosecutor just informs them to plead not guilty. They do and they get off. Funny to see that. On to our case. That's when I learned and saw who the witness was. And that hit-and-run offender did not show up, but their representative did. The police officer and I are witnesses and asked to wait outside the courtroom to be called upon. Wife goes first. My wife is in the gallery listening. I'm outside and I thank the officer again for her work in this case. Several minutes go by and I get called in. I step in, take the oath, and sit down. I've never been a witness or been in court really as a plaintiff or defendant, so it was all new to me. The prosecutor asks me a bunch of questions relating to everything and brings up the invoice that I supplied to her. The ex-copper takes offense to the invoice being entered last minute. They go back and forth and argue its admissibility, and the Crown Prosecutor wins that part. Cannot go into details about that. I'm an IT guy, legal jargon is very limited. So she asks about it and confirms the amount for repair, which was $1,300. The ex-copper's turn, he brings up the invoice and asks how much it says for parts. I say $400. Again, I don't remember exactly, but I remember it was well under the $750 limit for the ticket. I'll explain that later. And now he's done questioning me. The prosecutor takes another turn and reiterates how much the total was. That's it. A very limited testimony on my part. Really, not much other than I called the police to report the accident and then got my car repaired. And that's practically it. The officer is next. It gets interesting. And now the officer is next. And it gets interesting here. So the officer testifies pretty much to what went on so far, but goes on to say, after speaking to the witness, she got the van's license plates and headed to their place of residence. She informed the officer that the offender hit my car, swiping the entire side of her van, and my car moved a few inches as a result. Got out of her van, assessed the damages, got back in her van and left. The officer went to the offender's house and knocked on their door, and the offender answered the door and said, "Oh, I know why you're here." The officer asked to see the vehicle, to which the offender says her husband is out with it at the moment but should be back shortly. Moments later, the husband arrives with a van, same make, model, and year. The police officer asks where his van is, as the license plates are different. He says it's at a friend's house. He leaves to fetch his van, then arrives shortly after with his van. Big scratch from the right front wheel well to the back. The officer saw red paint transfer. My car was red, and documented the incident further. At this point, issued the failure to report an accident ticket. Ex-copper's turn to ask questions and asks how did you not know the offender wouldn't be calling the police to report the accident when she got home. And the great answer was, she had about 1 hour and 30 minutes to call from the time I called in to report the accident to when the officer showed up to the offender's door. All sorts of stuff to try and his client off right. I don't fool the ex-copper at all, this is his job to be honest. Anyways, that's it with testimony really. Now on to closing remarks and statement. The prosecutor goes first and points out the damage, the testimony and so on, normal stuff. Ex-copper's turn, he tries to dismiss based on the ticket's address. While there is no physical number, the address was listed as Spruce Pit on Cedar View Road on the ticket, and the ex-copper argues that it was 175 Cedar View. And the judge says, "Okay, let's make an amendment to the ticket to show the proper address. Prosecutor, okay with that?" And the prosecutor answers, "Yes." So they didn't get the ticket dismissed on that. Ex-copper then iterates that charge of failure to report an accident is for damage in excess of $700. And the judge squashes that and says overall the damage is $1,300. And that's just to the other vehicle, not even her own, which is likely more. He argues and it goes back and forth trying to claim all sorts of things. The ex-copper tries, but the judge is having none of it. Judgment time. The judge has heard it all, and decides that the charge will remain and in fact increase the amount of the fine to maximum $500. The ex-copper pleads with the judge to lower the fine as the offender's insurance will definitely be a bigger hit. And the judge replied with, and I will not forget this last part, the offender's relationship with her insurance is personal. What they decide to do with the outcome of this charge is a personal matter and not of this court's. And that's it. A $200 fine increased to $500. Could have been much worse for the offender, as I think they were working to deceive the officer, but the officer showed up before they could effectively finish the cover-up. I really wish I knew if and how much the offender's insurance went up. A friend had lesser charges, unrelated to a hit-and-run a few years back, and his insurance just bounced him completely and he has to be on high-risk insurance now, paying almost 4 times as much. The feeling of winning at the end and being vindicated with a judge increasing the fine to the max was just euphoric. Rewriting this the other day in a comment brought back those feelings, and writing this now brings it back too. Justice was served for me that day, and it feels great even to this day 13 years later. I certainly hope you enjoyed the story, and I did try to remember it the best I could. The ex-copper's arguments at the end may have happened while I was testifying as well. It's just been so long that I don't remember all the intricate details. Next story. Revenge backfires. This is not my story but my father's. He's 86, so this incident occurred 75 to 80 years ago. My father and his cousin used to go to the same school. There was another boy in a school who was a rival. One day, this boy, let's call him Ben, bet my father that he couldn't jump off from the clock tower. The winner would get a pound of a particular type of dessert. Anywho, Dad climbs a clock tower and jumps down from the first floor. Luckily, he only happened to fracture his legs near the ankles. Ben got so scared he put my dad on his bicycle and dumped him in front of my grandfather's house and sped away. 6 months later, when Dad recovered and rejoined the school, it was time to collect. Ben refused to make good on his side on the bargain. One day, Dad and my uncle decided that if the two of them ganged up, they could beat him up. So a plan was concocted. Time and place carefully chosen so nobody would see them in the act. Everything went smoothly. They beat up Ben and had him pinned down under them. And then they realized the big flaw in the plan: how to get up. So the two of them began crying. Now there were 3 boys who were crying: the bully who was still pinned under these 2 little boys and these 2. Luckily, after a few minutes, Ben's elder brother happened to pass by and saw them. This apparently is how the conversation went. Ben's brother says, "What's happening here?" And Ben answers him, "These 2 beat me up." Then his brother asks my dad and uncle, "So, why are you crying?" "Well, if we get up and let him go, he will beat us up again." The epilogue. Ben's brother was so amused by the story he told Dad's elder brother the entire thing. This led to a good thrashing for Dad at the hands of my grandmother, who couldn't figure out how Dad had managed to break his ankles. Ben was punished at his home for his share in the antics and making stupid bets. And Dad did manage to eat his pound of dessert though. Grandma made him eat that and nothing but that for a whole month. He developed an aversion to it and doesn't have it till this date. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.